Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Ross, and I'm back today with my first chapter of one of the books I'm going to be covering on my YouTube channel. As I said in my introduction that I posted, I guess it didn't get posted until yesterday, but basically I wanted to start creating some content for my website, for my YouTube channel, I mean. And I thought... I've been doing a lot of studying about government and data and information, and I've been reading a lot of books and just trying to, getting an understanding of myself about how government works, and just how projects and problems get solved. Which brings me into the book I'm going to be featuring on my Monday book series, which is this one here called Revolutionizing IT. It is by David Andrews and Kenneth Johnson. The subtitle being The Art of Using Information Technology Effectively. Now this was published relatively recently, this century, 2002, so about 15 years old now, but this I found is one of the most influential books I've read around project management. And that's really what its focus is. This is a book that was created by some technical managers, some IT professionals, sort of crystallizing the wisdom and knowledge that they've gained over the many years of development. And although, I mean, the technological world of 2017 is quite different than one from 15 years ago, many of the basic concepts about how to manage a project and how do you get a project so that one, you can complete it on time, on scope, on budget. That's really what a successful project is, that you set out, say, this is the problem we want to solve, and we've got this amount of money and this amount of time, these amount of people to throw at it, and here's the expected outcome. And so the book, Revolutionizing IT, is a really good... I think this is a must-read. This is a must-read for a lot of people, more than just IT professionals. In fact, I think this really ought to be read. This book ought to be read by every politician and every person, even in upper management inside government, because most projects have some sort of IT aspect. So when you're talking about IT projects, which is really what the focus of this book is, it's a direct parallel, but even still, a lot of the value of this book is not specific to information technology projects. This is an excellent book for learning about how to be an effective project manager, how to manage a project, no matter what type of project it is. But like I said, there will be some areas that will focus specifically on problems that projects that need to be solved, or problems that need to be solved with an IT bent. But even still, like I said, I think this is an immensely valuable book. And like I said, even today, many projects which may not have been IT related, in years past, now do. Now have that component just because the world has changed. We've evolved as a society from a paper-based society to one that is increasingly less so, and more IT, more information, more computer-focused. And government in particular is one area of our society that is the slowest to uptake technology into its problem solving and into its solutions. And usually they only bring technology in when someone else has been using it outside, and they sort of bring in new ideas. But there is definitely another issue that happens with I've seen this in government myself, because I've got a lot of experience programming projects for the provincial government here, so British Columbia. And I've seen many of the problems that they bring up in this book on the projects I've worked on, or even projects that I've paid attention to. Certainly, one of the things that they'll talk about is the idea that you really have to manage scope. You also want to start off small and then add incremental change. But like I said, I'm getting my head of myself. I think it just gets me really excited because it is such a really exceptionally well-written book. And like I said, even though it's 15 years old, it still has great applicability to today. So anyway, so I wanted to start off my video series for this particular book going through, I'll do the same thing that I did. I want to do the same thing with all the books that I'm doing. Is just sort of going over the table of contents very briefly, and then reading the introduction, and that'll be the first version of this. And then the next edition of this video, I'll read the first chapter. So anyway, so basically, like I said, so the overall parts of this book that we're going to be covering, I'll try and get this on camera. So there's chapter 1 and chapter 2. If you want to pause that and follow along, grab a screenshot or something. Okay, so chapter 1 is the nature of projects. So talking about terminology, principles and methodologies, the improvement of business process, and so on and so forth. Chapter 2 will be talking about in the beginning, so how projects are typically initiated, the virus that causes scope growth, and again, kind of what I touched on briefly, resource limitations, management misunderstanding, and so on and so forth. Chapter 3 is on the anatomy of projects. So here's chapter 3 there, and chapter 4 and chapter 5. So chapter 3 is the anatomy of a project. So this one will go in depth on breaking down a project into its smaller parts. Chapter 4 will be dealing with the elements of success. So talking about common characteristics of projects that are successful. And these include things such as strong leadership, time control, resource limitation, scope control, staged evolution, and concept recycling. Chapter 5 is going to talk about how to view projects. So what is considered a successful project? Why good plans are so hard to create. And sort of going into that. Chapter 6, here's chapter 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. Chapter 6 is deciding what to do. So defining specific project goals, organizing your task forces, and some practical advice. Chapter 7 will be controlling project scope, a very important chapter. So talking about how you let time determine your scope. Control the use of resources, limit the size of your design team, gauge your ability to absorb change, imitate, don't invent, create a single point of accountability, management's roles and scope control, and bite-sized pieces. Again, we'll kind of cover, I'm just reading through the chapter. We'll go into great detail in each of these chapters. Chapter 8 is about accountability, so who is accountable? Chapter 9 is about using package software. Now, this is one of the chapters that's more specific to IT problems, but it does talk about a very simple principle, which is I think I already read it a couple chapters up, which is imitate, don't invent. Don't reinvent the wheel is another common IT phrase. Well, probably just general phrase, but we use it quite often in the IT world. Which is, if there already is a solution, especially with prepackaged software, use that, because it's going to be cheaper than rolling your own, unless for some reason these packaged solutions don't provide you the complete solution that you need. But the idea and the principle we'll get into when we get into the chapter is primarily, if there is a prepackaged solution that you can embrace, do that before you start rolling your own solution. And that one actually, I think, will have a lot of application in principle. So that one actually, even though it is focused on an IT perspective, that prospect is really important in government, because often I see, especially at the local level, municipalities and regional governments trying to roll their own solution when many other municipalities have already tried to tackle the same problems. And sometimes they'll get their staff to go out and research what other solutions there are and then kind of present them, but very often that is not the case. Or even if it is the case, they don't get a comprehensive list. They'll kind of just cherry pick certain things that they are aware of. Like I said, it's part of the issue with the way government works, especially at the local level, is that the information is so fractured across thousands of silos across the whole country, and it's very hard to get a feel of what everybody else is doing, just because everything is so scattered, which in my argument is it shouldn't be that way. Chapter 10. So there's chapter 10 and 11, 12, and 13. And while we're at it, let's get chapter 14, chapter 15, and chapter 16. Okay, so chapter 10 will be the balancing act for talking about balancing the different aspects of a project. Chapter 11 is using outsiders wisely. So when you go out to third-party contractors or some outside source for your solution or part of your solution, how you deal with that sort of a problem. Again, this is also something that, even though this is talking about IT, has a direct correlation with many of the problems the government face, because often a municipal government will outsource certain aspects of its services, whether it's garbage collection or street cleaning or even things such as like gardening or any surface can be farmed out, and there are benefits and negatives to doing that. Chapter 12 is managing IT professionals. That one will be, again, fairly specific to IT, but as we get into it, there might be some interesting ideas. But even still, again, if you have an IT-specific project, it can also be very useful to read. Chapter 13 is management of projects. So the project scheduling dilemma, why most schedules are not met, and a different approach to scheduling. So we'll get into that. Chapter 14 is build software yourself. So this will be into if you can't get a pre-rolled version or a pre-baked version, how do you roll your own? Chapter 15, the changing world of software development. And so that one will get us into about the way. Now, this one actually might end up being somewhat out of date just because the IT world has changed significantly, especially on the front end, on web development. The way we develop interfaces has changed quite significantly. So I'll be kind of curious if we get into that. And I'll probably, that may be one of the chapters where I actually vary or disagree with some of the points that are in there, just simply because they've become out of date. Mostly because I specifically see a reference to Java in here. And Java, at the time this was written, would have still been the hot language. That was the first language I programmed in when I was starting out in my career. And it was one of the first platforms that was created with the idea of write once, run everywhere. That you could use the same language and it'll run on a server, on a client, on an embedded device like a phone or something like that. And today, Java never really took off in the way that the creators had hoped for. Although it did definitely build in certain areas, and particularly in enterprise software. So large software that works for large organizations, whether those big corporations or government, you will see Java quite heavily still in their infrastructures, especially if the infrastructure is a few years old, just because it does handle, thousands or even millions or potentially billions of users fairly well. But like I said, there are other technologies. I'm no longer a Java developer. I code primarily in JavaScript, which, despite the name similarities, are completely different languages. Chapter 16 is a review of the RITE approach. And RITE, they spell as R-I-T-E, which, again, if you... Do I have it on here? No, I don't. I thought it was... I thought it was the name that they used, but I guess not. They call it the RITE approach, which is just sort of summarizing the everything, the contents of the books. That's the last chapter, I believe. Yeah. So okay. I'm going to skip the about the authors because that's probably not that interesting. But I will go over the preface, and that's what I'll finish off. The preface and the introduction, and then we'll stop the video here and we'll do chapter 1 on the next week. All right. So preface. There is widespread agreement that information technology has the potential to dramatically change the way we work and live. At the same time, almost everyone believes that IT, or information technology, has so far failed to live up to its promise. When organizations attempt to use IT, more things seem to go wrong than right. Is the problem with the technology or the way in which organizations put IT to use? A growing number of organizations get excellent returns on the investment they make in IT. Do they know something that the less fortunate majority do not? We think they do, even though few of them could articulate exactly what it is. Offering a clear and non-technical explanation as to why certain IT projects succeed while many others fail is the goal of this book. We will also offer a concise set of principles to apply that will improve the odds of success. It is not clear what to call the set of ideas and observations. Revolutionizing IT was chosen because the point of view offered differs significantly from traditional ways of thinking. A more precise title would be Evolutionizing IT, but the compelling logic behind that name does not become clear until the book is read. We chose to make a bold statement in the title to get the attention of everyone who is frustrated with how difficult it is to turn the potential of IT into concrete benefits. And just to sort of comment on that, because I mean, like I said, this is 15 years ago, and we have moved quite a bit forward. And I would say there's still there are probably more successful projects, but there are also probably more failed projects, and just the scope of the amount of problems that are being tackled in an IT perspective are much greater now than they were 15 years ago. In the same way, they will be much greater in 15 years than they are today. But that ratio of success to fail, I think, and failure, although they're being a little bit black and white, failure is one of those things that if your project takes more time or costs more money or requires more resources to complete the problem as originally devised, that in a sense is a failure. I mean, the project itself may work, but the fact that you've blown your budget or you've blown your timeline is a sort of failure. This is certainly a good example of this right now going on in the city of Victoria, is the Johnson Street Bridge. The Johnson Street Bridge was supposed to have been replaced and open, I believe, and its original design was 2015. And yet here we are 2017, and it's still not complete, and it still may not be complete until next year, and possibly not even the year after that, due to a number of project management bungles that I will try and pick a couple of those up and show and sort of use as examples when I get into further into the book. But okay. If your job involves improving the way information is dealt with, then this book was written for you. If you're looking for a book to take to the beach that will transport your mind to a place of mystery, adventure, or romance, you will have to look elsewhere. We have worked hard to offer compelling new ideas in an interesting and understandable form, but the subject remains a serious one, a new approach to undertaking IT projects. The frustration of managing information technology. The IT function can seem like an island where the natives speak a strange tongue. Suspicion abounds between them and those on the mainland. Management understands the importance of this unique function, but is unsure exactly how to maximize the return on the steadily growing cost. Most executives have a set of principles that they apply when managing each function. For example, they understand the sales dynamics of their industry, what motivates customers to buy, how to develop incentives for salespeople, and what to say when an important customer is unhappy. Good managers also understand the economics of their business, what products or services make the most profit, which costs must be carefully controlled, and where to look when results do not meet expectations. When overseeing the IT function, however, frustration sets in. The arcane details of the technology are hard to follow, as is the jargon used by those who understand it. Many executives are reluctant to admit how confused they really feel. A common strategy is to let the people who seem to understand the technology make decisions about it. The need for those who oversee complex organizations to be good at managing the use of IT is a relatively recent development. Before the mid-1990s, IT was widely treated as an annoying necessity. The impending arrival of January 1st, 2000 helped organizations realize how completely dependent they had become. The mid-1990s was also the point when the extraordinary opportunities offered by the internet became obvious to everyone. A period of internet euphoria came and went as a new century dawned. It left behind an understanding that IT matters a great deal, but that using it effectively is far from automatic. I just want to pause there again because this, again, is very much a dated couple of paragraphs talking about the state of the world 2002. And to bring you back, if you're not familiar, if you're a younger audience member, or if you do remember the 90s, the internet changed everything and continues to change everything. It is the most important invention since the printing press, in the how it disseminates and spreads information has a larger impact on us than any other technology to come before. In fact, the only technologies that predate the internet, but not counting the printing press, would be the radio and television that had similar sort of qualities. And certainly Marshall McLuhan, if you're familiar with his writings, went heavily into this idea of how radio and television were creating this unification of senses that had been forced apart since the invention of writing, going back thousands of years. And in fact, that's a book I'd like to get into. I don't know if I'll get to it right off the bat, but there's a book of his, one of my favorite books is called The Gutenberg Galaxy, where he talks about how technology changes the way we think, that our tools change our minds. and it's a fascinating read. Um, but basically, like I said, the 1990s, we suddenly went through the internet changing everything. All of a sudden, information that you used to have to send away by mail or write to someone or phone or maybe watch on television or radio could be accessed, at your fingertips on your computer. And that profound change is still revolutionizing our systems. And government, like I said, much of government has changed. Certainly, like I said, when I graduated college in '98. So I got in on the early wave of our province, anyway, British Columbia, getting on to really embracing IT. The government at the time was pushing a lot of money into IT infrastructure, and so there were a lot of systems that were built in that late '90s, early 2000s period that are still in place today. And uh, so even though and there definitely was one interesting thing that happened back then was this big bubble that happened shortly after the internet. Late '90s was the first, especially '98, I think, is where they sort of put the bubble primarily in. Was the first big internet gold rush. Every company that was an IT startup was getting money thrown at it, and some of them failed and some of them succeeded wildly. That's where the Googles took off and early 2000s. Of the world, but the Amazons and those sort of companies. And even ones that have been around like Microsoft and Apple took way off because, again, technology started to become much more widespread. Instead of a computer, really it was the internet that brought the computer into everyone's lives. Before the internet, the most people probably still didn't have a computer at home, or if they did, it was something that sat in their office that they used for word processing or for keeping track of their finances or stuff like that. But it certainly wasn't a recreational tool for most people. So to move forward to today, we're in a similar sort of situation. Again, the mobile phone was a technological implementation of all these different technologies of internet access and cellular phones and GPS and all sorts of really interesting tools in the same portable device that suddenly everybody had, which means they were, instead of, when I grew up and even in the '90s, when I was using a computer, I'd have to sit down at my table and use my computer. And then when I was away from home, I was not connected to the internet. And now this is a pervasive, continuous, 24/7 thing that we all experience, or most of us do anyway. But we still also have many of the same sort of challenges that those new technologies, the things like mobile technology, and miniaturization of computers, and we're even seeing this now with things like robotics becoming big and miniature computers like the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi. You're seeing people create really interesting technology out of their garage that really couldn't have been done 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that technology is going to continue to revolutionize the way we process information. So, like I said, much of this idea, even though, like I said, it's 15 years old and some of the examples might be dated, but the concepts are still extremely applicable. We're even in our own new internet bubble, to a sense, that I think we're going through another cycle where we have a lot of IT companies getting money. And maybe that'll pop at some point, and who knows, but it's just the nature of technology. Okay, so moving on. Fortunately, it has become possible to improve the odds of success dramatically by adopting a new approach to IT projects. Explaining the new line of thinking in plain, non-technical language is our mission. In addition, we intend to explain why making effective use of information technology is so difficult, explore the organizational dynamics that are the root cause of most problems, remove some of the mystery from IT, and be easy and entertaining to read. This book is not about the mechanics of project management. Countless books already cover that subject well. Instead, it offers profoundly simple principles to apply when managing technology. It is based on the belief that managers do not have to become experts in technology to make effective use of it. Like it or not, your organization spends a great deal of money managing information. The actual amount spent is probably far larger than you think. Spending this money wisely has become essential for success. Fortunately, a proven set of easy-to-understand concepts can be applied that will increase the return on that investment. Who should read this book? The primary audience for this book is managers and knowledge workers with organizations that depend heavily on IT. Those who make decisions for such organizations will benefit the most. In appreciation of the value of their time, the writing offers useful advice as clearly and concisely as possible. Even though the writing is intentionally non-technical, IT professionals, from computer operators to chief information officers, will find value in understanding the line of thinking presented here. The most common reaction of those already exposed to those ideas has been for them to offer a story from their own personal experience that illustrates one or more of the points made. This experience has given us great confidence that the ideas offered here will be well accepted. At the same time, an attack on the status quo is certain to provoke some negative reaction. The suggestions offered here will not be welcomed everywhere. For example, the business models of some IT service providers will be weakened if their clients fully adopt the proposed philosophy. Likewise, others whose power and prestige might be threatened may also choose to disagree strongly. Those who are intrigued by our intentionally bold assertions are welcome to read on and discover more. Whatever your background, this subject is for you. Those looking to escape from reality while lying on a beach will hopefully find something suitable to their needs elsewhere. A little tongue-in-cheek, but basically what they're saying is that the language of this book is intended to be at a broad audience. This is not meant to be a technical book. So again, this is also one of the reasons why I think this is such a valuable book, is because it's not written for a technical audience. It's specifically written for managers, people who are non-technical and trying to solve technical problems. That is why I think this should be a required reading for every person who gets elected to office and every high level governmental official as well, because those are the people who, up to date, have a very poor understanding of technology. It's one of the things that baffles me when I go to council meetings or different committee meetings and whatnot, is just how Luddite most politicians are. They really don't understand technology, and they don't understand why this. Oh, I should take my headphones off. Why this is such a. It's not that difficult a problem. When you're dealing with technology, it's not that difficult. If you understand some basic concepts. And so that's, again, what we're talking about here. All right, let's go on to the introduction. 50 years ago, large numbers of people died needlessly from heart attacks. They did not know that eating a low-fat diet, avoiding smoking, and exercising could reduce the risk of heart disease. Today, large numbers of organizations are suffering needlessly as well. They pour a great deal of money, time, and energy into information technology projects that fail to deliver the benefits that were used to justify them. A high percentage of these failures are preventable if the right measures are taken, the corporate equivalent to giving up cheeseburgers and camels and joining the gym. Up until a few years ago, the fact that a high percentage of IT projects went awry was unfortunate but tolerable. Computers were often considered a necessary annoyance. If it took a few tries to get them working properly, the organization could successfully grind along a little longer without them. But the era when IT did not matter a great deal is now over. Being able to take advantage of all that technology has to offer, has become an essential ingredient for success in almost every industry. Knowing how to prevent the common disease that strikes half or more of the IT projects that are undertaken has therefore become critical. Fortunately, the nature of IT project disease is becoming apparent along with effective strategies for its prevention. Offering a new view of the nature of this affliction and how to deal with it is the goal of this book. Medieval doctors unknowingly did many things that worsened the conditions they tried to treat. Today, the community of IT professionals often inadvertently does the same thing by following approaches that have been widely used for decades, but that do not work well in practice. Once a disease is understood, it is possible to develop effective treatments. In this case, there is still no certain cure, but there is a proven approach that will improve the odds of success dramatically. Hundreds of books have been written on the subject of managing information technology. They typically describe in detail the mechanics of how to organize and carry out improvement projects. Most bemoan the historical low rate of success and suggest that organization and discipline are among the cures. A number of them do an outstanding job of providing advice to those who manage complex projects, especially when sophisticated new software needs to be created. However, there is a gaping hole that this large body of work has failed to fill. Too little is available for decision makers to read that helps them understand how to avoid the common pitfalls. Experts in IT project management have turned out a massive amount of material in the past decade. much of it containing outstanding observations and sophisticated suggestions. Very little of it has been offered in a form useful to those who are not full-time IT professionals. The focus of much of the recent advanced thinking has been on the problem faced by large-scale projects, especially those involving hundreds of people. Too little good advice is available to guide the much larger number of organizations that undertake projects of a more modest size. This is especially true when the project revolves around the development of packaged software. The purpose of this book. This book is a collection of easy-to-understand suggestions about how organizations can manage IT more profitably. The unifying theme is that it is necessary to undertake projects in what seems like an unusual way in order to improve the odds of success. It is about management, not the esoteric details of the technology itself. Those who feel intimidated by the technology jargon that increasingly creeps into everyday conversation need not be concerned. The observations and ideas offered here were collected over a period of 35 years. The most valuable have come from interaction with people struggling with the challenge of making effective use of IT. The post-mortem analysis of successes and failures has also been a major source of input. At the same time, this book is based on subjective opinions and is not the result of rigorous research or surveys. It has proven impossible to determine the exact originators of each of the ideas described in this book. Different people came to similar conclusions at approximately the same time, making it difficult to give the proper credit to each of them. We do not claim to be the first to discover any of the truths or ideas articulated here. Rather, our role is to organize and present them in a coherent form. It is our hope that we have met our objective of describing them in a clear and useful manner that people within ordinary organizations, especially those of moderate size, can apply. The concrete suggestions offered here are more than just theories. They have been the foundation of an IT service business, now called Andrews Consulting Group, since its inception in 1984. Numerous examples involve Andrews Consulting Group clients have been included. Clients who have been exposed to these concepts have chosen to use them in different ways. A few have adopted the entire philosophy, while many more have chosen to use selected elements. The initial reason for writing this book was to help our clients and prospects understand the hard lessons we have learned. Drafts of the book have been successfully used for this purpose for almost 2 years. The reaction of those reading drafts was so positive that a decision was to make these ideas available to everyone. The ideas offered here represent a work in progress that is constantly being updated and improved. It is our hope that publishing them will trigger a broader discussion and lead to further refinement and expansion. A website has been created at www.rightapproach.com to facilitate this process. I'll have to check that and see if that still exists. Many people will want to quickly understand the essence of our point of view. A concise summary of the ideas in this book has therefore been included in Chapter 16. Those anxious to get to the bottom line quickly are invited to read that chapter first. As we offer our thoughts to a broader audience, it is also our goal to make the presentation interesting and sometimes amusing. We believe that a serious book about important business issues should not make the reader's brain hurt. Having some fun does not imply that the subject is unimportant. Is another new acronym needed? We have decided to give the set of observations, ideas, and practical advice assembled in this book a name. Doing so has made writing about the various ideas presented here simpler, since they can be referred to collectively. Hopefully, others will find it useful to use the term to refer to a new approach to projects that incorporates the best of many different techniques. The full name of this book is Revolutionizing IT, the Art of Using Information Technology Effectively. We have boiled that down into capital R, Revolutionizing IT, capital E, Effectively, so that we can call our ideas the right approach, R-I-T-E. The right approach is an integrated collection of observations and principles designed to provide guidelines to those who make decisions regarding IT projects. It assesses fundamental issues that include how organizations should think about, organize, and carry out projects, who should be accountable for success, what it is reasonable to expect, how success should be defined, and why limits need to be set. The right approach includes many suggestions about how to undertake projects, but it is not itself a methodology. Hopefully, the right approach will become embedded in numerous formal methodologies as time passes. The right approach differs from the most commonly used approaches in a number of important ways. It demands that organizations and their senior management adopt a new way of thinking about IT projects, use new definitions and measurements for success, learn a new pattern of behavior, understand and accept practical limitations, assign accountability fully and carefully, pay more attention during the formative stages of projects, and think differently about schedules. As the right approach and the philosophy behind it unfold, it will become clear that a number of simple principles form its foundation. Some of the most powerful of the right approach concepts are: let time determine project scope. Success is is a never-ending succession of incremental improvements. Projects should mimic evolution. Where possible, imitate, don't invent. Demand progress, not perfection. And make end users fully accountable. The wisdom of these simple thoughts will become apparent as the reasoning behind them is developed. So, those 6 points at the end are, again, a great crystallization of many of the key points of the book, and have a no matter what type of problem you're trying to solve, these problems, these principles apply in almost all of them. So letting time determine your project scope. So instead of deciding this is what we need to do, is what can we do within this calendar year or within these next 3 months. Success is never an ending succession of incremental improvements, and that is very true to the nature of software development. Software development, usually the most successful software development, starts off with the kernel of a good idea, builds it and implements it so that it's perfect as can be, and then add new functionality incrementally. So small changes incrementally added into the system as it evolves, so that you get to continually go through the design, develop, test, and a cycle that goes in a continual process. Your software sort of evolves gradually over time to become a system that may become that complete solution that you're looking for. And this is one of those where I see some of the most public software bungles at the public in the public sphere are because they did not specifically approach that problems in that fashion. The one I'm thinking of specifically, I think this, but pretty much in most of the health. The way that the Ministry of Health is divided in this province is sort of separated by regions. So the Vancouver Island area has one health authority. There's one the sort of each different section of the province has its own sort of group, and they all have their own individual IT solutions. And I know a couple that have brought in these IT solutions relatively recently that were basically supposed to be all in one solution. They needed all these different problems solved, and they were trying to solve them all at once. And as a result, those projects ballooned in scope, ballooned in cost, and blew their timelines all to hell. Projects should mimic evolution. So again, kind of talking about that idea that it should evolve and evolve in smart and intelligent ways, in ways that make the system better. And again, where possible, imitate, don't invent. So again, if there already is a solution out there that you can take advantage of that solution. Only when you run out of options is when you should be looking at customizing. Demand progress, not perfection. So again, it's not about creating the perfect solution right out of the gate. It's about creating something that's good, better than the existing system, and improves over time to become more and more perfect. Make end users fully accountable. And this is where we'll have to go into more depth when we get into the chapters. But again, it's about accountability in general. Is something they talk about, that you really need to make sure that there's a clear chain of command. Another good example I can think of right now is, again, going back to the City of Victoria, Johnson Street Bridge. There was not a clear accountable line of succession. And that ended up in these third-party contractors that designed the bridge and the people inside the city's staff pointing blame at each other. And this is something that happens if you don't have someone who the accountability falls on. Then you end up with this blame problem where it's not my problem, it's his problem. It's not his problem, it's my problem. And this certainly happens, especially when you're dealing with third party. I've encountered this personally in many of the jobs I've worked on. To some level, sometimes it's really bad, and sometimes it's it's not as bad. But usually, when it's bad, is because nobody's willing to take responsibility. But again, we'll get into that when we get into the book. Anyway, so that's a brief overview of Revolutionizing IT. I'm going to come back next week and get into chapter 1, and then we'll do a chapter a week for the next 16 weeks or so, which ought to bring us to basically pretty much the end of the year. Yeah, that's basically the plan. So that is Monday's video. I will sign off now, And I'll be back tomorrow with another video covering another book. But anyway, I hope if you find this interesting, you stick with me throughout the whole thing, because this one in particular is going to be a really interesting study, just because it's very, it covers topics that are very personal to me. I have a lot of professional experience in this area at all sorts of levels, both being an underling as well as managing and everywhere in between. And like I said, it also, I think it covers many subjects that, even though they're not specifically IT problems, the many things that governments face could be solved much more effectively by applying principles in this book. So anyway, that is it for today. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time.